This is the first of two recordings on auxiliary verbs. Auxiliary verbs are what the word says, they're helping verbs. Yeah? Like an auxiliary nurse is a nurse who helps. An auxiliary verb is a verb that doesn't occur by itself. Yeah? It occurs with another verb or other verbs. Yeah? And when they occur with another verb, it's always some non-finite form of another verb. So an ing form, a participle, or a bare infinitive. It doesn't occur with a full infinitive. The exception to the rule that they do not occur on their own is when you're giving an answer to a question, such as, is he cycling to London? Then you can say, yes, he is. But you can only say, yes, he is, because it's obvious then from the context, from the preceding question, that what you're really communicating is that, yes, he is cycling to London. Okay, when you have auxiliaries and main verbs, the auxiliary always comes before the main verb or verb, so always to the left. Yeah? And the good news is that there are only 14 of them, and here they are. Here you've got 4 verbs that are called the primary auxiliaries. You've got progressive auxiliary be, as in John is reading a book. You've got passive auxiliary be. The grass was mown by Mary. Yeah, so although it's the same form be, yeah, they are actually 2 different words. Yeah, different lexical items in your mental lexicon. Okay, then we've got perfect auxiliary have, as in he has written the letter. And we've got dummy auxiliary do you like jazz? So those are the 4 primary auxiliaries. And then we've got the 10 modals: can, may, must, will, shall, should, could, would, might, and ought to. We used to always have need as an auxiliary, but that really isn't used anymore. We do, of course, have need as a main verb, but we don't use it as an auxiliary anymore. Modals are a bit special, and look at these. Yeah, you can't say he can swim, you would say he can swim, or she must go home. You don't say that, you say she must go home. So what we find is that modal verbs differ from all other verbs, main verbs and auxiliaries, and that they do not take third person singular s. Yeah, so there's no s at the end of the verb in third person singular present. They're also different in that they only occur as finite verbs. Yeah, so they only occur with tense. So we don't say to must, or he is canning swim or something. You can't use non-finite verbs of modals. Okay, quick recap. Do you still remember? In sentences with one verb, the verb must be a what? An auxiliary or a main verb? Well, I hope you said main verb, because that's correct. Yeah, auxiliaries always have to occur with at least another verb. Sentences with 2 verbs in a row where the second verb is in full infinitive form, a 2 plus verb form. For example, he needs to eat. What is the first verb in such a sentence? Auxiliary or main verb? Well, it's always a main verb. Yeah, so auxiliaries don't occur with a full infinitive form. Okay, well, how can you check if you're not sure whether you're dealing with an auxiliary or a main verb? Well, the straightforward way to do that is to turn a declarative sentence, that is a sentence that makes a statement, into a yes-no question. So here we've got 2 statements, 2 declarative sentences. Mary can swim, birds eat cheese. So to turn them into questions, you take the verb and put it at the front. Yeah. Can Mary swim? That works fine. Eat birds cheese? Not fine. Okay, well, what's the difference? Well, when you have an auxiliary, you can do what's called subject auxiliary inversion. Yeah, so Mary can swim. You invert the positions of the auxiliary and the subject to can Mary swim. If you try and do that with a main verb like eat, birds eat cheese, eat birds cheese, that doesn't work. So that shows that eat is not an auxiliary. And instead, to make a question, a yes-no question from birds eat cheese, what you do is you use dummy do. So you stick in dummy do birds eat cheese. So that's one of the reasons why we've got dummy do, is to form yes-no questions, or even WH questions, when there is no auxiliary in the sentence. So, auxiliaries allow subject-auxiliary inversion and main verbs don't. Let's try a few. Mary will be tired. Yeah, can you do subject-auxiliary inversion? Well, yes, you can. You can say, will Mary be tired? So, will must be an auxiliary, and it is. It's a modal auxiliary. John was playing. Can you do inversion here? Yeah, you can. You can say, was John playing? So again, was is an auxiliary, and it's in fact a progressive be, a form of progressive be. He can go. Can you do the inversion here? Yes, because you can say, can he go? So can is an auxiliary, and it's in fact another modal. He slept. Well, no, you don't say slept he, you would say did he sleep. So slept is not an auxiliary, it's a main verb. And she likes cake. You don't say likes she cake, but you would say does she like cake. Yeah, so you're using that dummy auxiliary do, and that shows that likes is a main verb. So, just to reiterate, only auxiliary verbs allow subject-auxiliary inversion. So if a verb can undergo this inversion, then it must be an auxiliary. Now this is a second property of auxiliary verbs. They can occur in what I call tag questions. Now tag questions, something typical of English, the little questions that you can stick to the end of sentences, of declarative sentences. So something like, he can see it, can't he? Or she shouldn't go, should she? Now, you always form tag questions with an auxiliary verb, not with a main verb. So you can't say, he tried to go, tridn't he? Or he knows, knows he? Yeah? Only auxiliary verbs can occur in tag questions. So yeah, how would you do it with he tried to go? Well, just as with questions, you'd form it with dummy do. So you say, he tried to go, didn't he? He knows, doesn't he? So if a verb can occur in a tag question, then it must be an auxiliary. A third property of auxiliaries is that they can occur with negation. And negation is basically making the sentence negative, so using not. And then it's usually contracted to n''t. So you get, he can't see it, she shouldn't go. And again, if you try to do that with a main verb, it doesn't work. He tridn't to go, he knowsn't it. You don't say that. And of course, by now, the pattern is clear. You would use dummy auxiliary do. So he didn't try to go, or he doesn't know it. Yeah, so only auxiliary verbs can occur with negation, with using not. Now, there's one exception to these rules, and that's copular be. So if you say Mary is clever, yeah, clever, of course, is an adjective, so there's only one verb in this sentence, is, but if you do the tests for auxiliaries, it behaves like an auxiliary. So you say, is Mary clever? Yeah, so you get subject, verb, inversion. Mary is clever, isn't she? You get it in the tag question. And Mary isn't clever, you get is with negation. But it is a real exception because be is a main verb here. And you can tell, of course, because there's only one verb. Yeah? So keep that in mind. Copula be is an exception to the rule, but that's it. That's the only exception. So let's try a few. Bill was caught by the police. What's was here? Is it a main verb or an auxiliary? Yeah. Well, if you try a test, yeah, so if you do subject auxiliary inversion, you get was Bill caught by the police? You can say Bill was caught by the police, wasn't he? And Bill wasn't caught by the police. So all our tests show us that this is an auxiliary, not a main verb. John wants to go to Mars. What's that? Well, you can't say wants John to go to Mars, yeah, or John wants to go to Mars, wasn't he, or something, or John wasn't to go to Mars. None of that works, so that shows us that that wants is a main verb. Yeah, you would have to say, does John want to go to Mars? Mary has caught a cold. Yeah, has Mary caught a cold? She's caught a cold, hasn't she? She hasn't caught a cold, so it's another auxiliary. Yeah, and it's actually the perfect auxiliary have. And Sue must go home. Must Sue go home? Mustn't she? Yeah, Sue mustn't go home. It's another auxiliary. Oh, another one. We had a great time. Yeah. Had we a great time? No. Did we have a great time? We had a great time, didn't we? Not hadn't we. And we hadn't a great time. You can't say that. You would say we didn't have a great time. So although it's have, yeah, it's a different have from auxiliary have. It's actually a main verb have here. Yeah. So what you see is that you also have two different verbs have. Yeah, main verb have and perfect auxiliary have. And that's the end of this recording.